Hi, this is Peter Hochschild speaking on behalf of my collaborators and co-authors at Google. We have a new problem: CPU cores that repeatedly, but not always, miscalculate certain computations without giving any obvious signal. These cores violate their architectural specification. We call them mercurial cores, and we call their disobedience corrupt execution errors. These are due to local silicon defects and not to classically cited causes such as cosmic rays. This is not nature randomly firing alpha particles at innocent circuits. This talk sketches an unfinished adventure in data corruption. We'll explain how our suspicions arose and how we investigated and confirmed them. We'll speak to the impact of mercurial cores and the challenges of experimentation and measurement. We'll describe some early mitigations and suggest some possible research directions. Our adventure began as vigilant production teams increasingly complained of recidivist machines corrupting data. These machines were credibly accused of corrupting multiple different, stable, well-debugged, large-scale applications. Each machine was accused repeatedly by independent teams, but conventional diagnostics found nothing wrong with them. Our suspicions grew when correct and localized code changes dramatically increased the corruption rate in a large-scale application. Our extensive crash telemetry also revealed patterns of recidivism that deepened suspicions and hinted at core-specific defects. To investigate this, we built some initially simple screens inspired by production incidents. The screens were composed of compression, cryptography, math, and similar computational kernels. We assembled a large quarantine pool of suspect machines and large control pools of so-called presumed good machines. Under concerted testing, quarantined machines exhibited decisive patterns of recidivism. Each failing machine generally contains just one particular failing core. Defective machines are often caught by multiple independent screens. Failures are generally non-deterministic and repeat only from time to time. Further confirmation of defects came as we discovered that we could modulate failure rates by changing operating conditions such as frequency and temperature. We found that many of these failures stem from diverse CPU core defects. Some defects manifest only with age and may not be detectable when first deployed. The only good thing about the situation is that if you can find the defective CPUs, you can remove them. There's been lots of prior work on silent data corruption, but this seems different. It affects general computational silicon, not just the more tractable familiar memory storage and networking corruption modes. It arises from particular CPU cores, and it occurs at rates posing significant risk when viewed at scale. We speculate that it's driven in part by the pressures of performance and density, and in part by the testing challenges posed by complex and specialized designs. Here I want to gratefully cite and acknowledge our colleagues at Facebook who recently published their early findings on silent data corruption. From a user's point of view, corrupt execution errors fall into three increasingly severe patterns. First, they may cause process and kernel crashes, and they may cause application invariant checks to fire. Second, undetected faulty computation can produce wrong answers. And third, undetected faulty computation could cause data loss. Consider, for example, corruption of encryption keys and corruption of storage metadata. Such errors are corruption amplifiers that can destroy large swaths of data. And only the first pattern, crashing, is addressed by the fail-stop model that commonly guides distributed system design. Typical mercurial CPU cores engage at different times in all three of these execution patterns. One of our mercurial cores corrupted encryption. It did it in such a way that only it could decrypt what it had wrongly encrypted. You might reasonably ask questions like what fraction of CPUs are defective, and what is the rate at which real workloads get corrupted? We found these to be very difficult questions. They remain for us a focus of intensive study. There are three broad categories of confounding factors, factors that make this hard. First, our ability to detect mercurial cores is limited, it's uncertain, and it's changing. It's generally improving over time. Second, the population is ever changing. Corrupt CPUs are removed, CPUs age, and new machines and new types of machines are deployed. Third, there are known and unknown modulators at play. For example, there are systemic changes to workloads and to machine operating conditions. We classify our mitigation interventions into four major categories. We screen machines before deployment and periodically during their lives. We detect corrupt machines on the basis of signals derived from crashes, from machine checks, code sanitizer hits, and so forth. We exploit and strengthen application-level resilience through end-to-end checksums, invariant checks, and in particularly delicate places, replicated computation. We carefully triage production incidents to detect and evict defective machines. In aggregate, these partially effective measures catch a lot of corrupt CPUs. We're continuing intense development to improve mitigation. The primary challenges here are in defect coverage, detection latency, and determining and balancing risks against costs. We'd like to catch more of the corruptors earlier before they've done much damage at lower cost. These graphs compare the rate at which humans identify corrupt CPUs to the rate at which our developing automation does. The automation detection rate is shown in purple. You can see automated detection is improving, but the humans, who are probably getting better at it, still catch a lot of the defective CPUs. We find this a really fascinating and rich area for research. Here are some possible directions for future research. Applications can better protect themselves with self-checking algorithms, with efficient replication of computation, and with more resilient infrastructure. Sanitizers and compiler-assisted resilience could actually help automate this. Some resilience techniques do double duty, detecting and mitigating both hardware-induced and software bug-induced corruption. And resilient software calls for new approaches in testing and test coverage metrics. Machine and process health telemetry provide data that can be mined for signals of corrupt machines, and of course for buggy software too. Automatic generation, extraction, and distillation of high coverage, low detection latency in situ screens makes for some interesting problems. Realistic fault models, better architectural resilience, better design for test and in situ testing techniques would directly combat corrupt execution errors at the hardware level. Rigorous quantification cuts across all of these areas. In particular, timely warning of corruption rate increases is very valuable. We'll be excited to learn from future academic and industrial research, and we're eager to help foster fruitful collaboration. Thanks very much.